for our very first virtual experience with Spivey Hall. And I hope that you enjoyed the performance from Wigmore Hall this morning with Stephen Hough. I know I did. Sam's here to tell us a little bit about it. So Sam, I'll let you get started and then we can see if anyone has any questions. Feel free, if you have any questions as we're going through this, just type them in the chat box in the bottom, or if you're watching on Facebook, you can type your questions in there and we'll try to get to everybody. Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Elise, and good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be with you virtually, but with you in real time after having heard a live performance, the likes of which we haven't had for quite some time. When I heard that this series was announced, I immediately got excited because there's several artists in these daily weekday, what I guess Andrew McGregor is calling lockdown lunchtime concerts, that are feature artists that we've seen regularly at Spivey Hall, and there's such a beautiful array of other artists as well. So you know, what an abundance of performances in the month of June. And many of you who know me know that I'm more likely to be up at 2 a.m. than I am at, say, 8 a.m. for anything particular, but these are worth getting up for. But we also created this experience because we wanted to have an opportunity to, quote, be with our friends and to be gathered in the name of great music and have opportunities to sort of chat with each other and share our responses and ask questions and sort of recall some of that beautiful familiarity and camaraderie we have here at Spivey Hall when we are giving concerts, which someday we will be doing, I'm sure. So I was so taken by this choice of program. It was fascinating to me that Stephen, I don't know who told him that it was 119 years to the day that the Bach Busoni Chaconne had been performed, but it's an interesting choice. And of course it heralds a really important era, you know, of the beginning of Bechstein Hall as it was at the time. I love the formality of the Bach. I also love the sort of the stiff spine it has. As a chaconne too, it has this quality of repeating the same 4-bar phrase that is sort of like an experience for our times right now. It's as if there's an issue. There is something to deal with and you have to work at it. You have to unknot it somehow. You have to figure it out from several different perspectives. You have to return to it and then you think about it and your thoughts take you someplace. And towards the end, you go from minor to major in this beautiful chorale experience, which is sort of like, oh yeah, I've sort of figured out how to get through this, or I found a solution for myself. And then as that world sort of has its moment of glow, then the minor shows up again and the piece has to return to its sort of its opening, but that creates a beautiful structure for the piece. It's very, again, it's formal, but it's noble. It has a certain nobility of spirit and at the same time expansiveness that I really love, and it's used in that way. But that was paired with the Schumann Fantasy, which is all about love. I mean, that is just a love letter. And that also has a motive, this descending 6-note motive, which is Clara's theme. Clara has a theme. When Schumann and Clara were separated, and when he was writing this extraordinary range of fantastic music on the piano principally, they always had codes for each other. They had little secrets, they inside, you know, language of their own love of each other, and quoting from Beethoven and giving her a theme. You know, that's Schumann. That's Schumann being imaginative and creative and sort of renegade and trying to nurture his love with this woman that his prospective father-in-law had separated him from. Until, of course, they went to court and got married. So I love the piece, and it's something that actually we're supposed to be hearing if Kenny Broberg shows up in September. That's the work that's supposed to close his program. It's a program of fantasies, essentially. So Stephen did beautifully. I am so impressed by him, and we know and love Stephen. He is a polymath, to put it mildly. He is so accomplished. He has so many wonderful things on the front and back burners all the time. The last time we heard him here at Spivey Hall was in November of 2018, when he gave us both books of the Debussy Mage and a fantastic Beethoven Appassionata as well. Many of you who are online know that Stephen's constantly online doing things, and I was pleased to know that he's just come out recently with a new book. It's called Rough Ideas, and you can get it on Kindle. It's going to be published in the US a little bit later, I think, this year in paperback. And it's a collection of his writings, which are very, very far-flung in terms of their topics. So Stephen is someone who's very alive in the world. He's a published poet. He's a painter who's had works displayed in London at a gallery. He writes, he's constantly being quoted in the press. And he's someone who thinks very deeply about the world. Every time we get together and have dinner with Stephen is invariably stimulating and fascinating and oftentimes very funny. I also think he doesn't shy away from controversial topics. And if you're looking on Kindle, you can also find his book on the astrology of sex, which is sort of interesting because it defines you in terms of how your partner perceives you according to your astrological zodiac sign. So that's, that is Stephen Hough. This is the man for whom nothing is off limits, particularly his novel. There was nothing off limits there. But we adore Stephen, and he's, one of the first musician ever to get a MacArthur Genius Foundation grant. Well, I've got that slightly mixed up, but MacArthur Foundation Genius grant. That's what I'm trying to say. I need more tea or coffee. And it's like finding a friend in this performance to have him sit down and perform for us. It's odd to be in an empty hall playing for people, although artists are used to doing that. Sometimes when they're recording, generally they're in a studio, but sometimes it's in a concert hall. But for those of you who follow The New Yorker and Alex Ross, you will have noticed his recent writings about Igor Levit and how in this era, artists have taken to the idea that they can reach people directly and immediately without any BBC Radio 3 or any Spivey Hall, because when someone sets up a camera and a microphone and can stream live from his or her home, like Angela Hewitt's been doing, then you have this direct and immediate connection with audiences. And Igor has stated quite strongly to Alex Ross, the critic of The New Yorker, that this is something he's not going to be giving up. This is something that means a great deal to him, that he has the ability to sit down and play and do it when he wants to, and that has been perhaps a silver lining to this crisis. So anyway, we've just had a great live performance, and I can remember seeing Stephen on stage here, and of course it's wonderful to have those memories. And I was really interested to see how they produced this performance as well. The video was great. It was not too busy, but it gave us enough different perspectives of his face and the fingers, of course, but also sort of the empty hall and John Gahuli sitting on the right of his hall, with Andrew, the presenter there. My audio quality was coming over my iPhone, but it's still with Stephen's performance. I'll say one comment about Stephen. He's such an amazing musician. His style at the piano is different. He doesn't belabor things. He doesn't dwell too heavily on things. He's immensely sensitive as a player. But he basically believes, and I'm going to use a sort of a speech metaphor here, that the sentence is written and you don't need to do much more than speak the sentence in an intelligent way. You don't need to hold or stretch or you don't have to fuss with it. You go through it. You go through the thought and the thoughts will speak for themselves. So unlike other performances I've heard, this one had this directness and a freshness and this moving forward quality that at the same time lets the music speak I think in a wonderful way. So I don't know, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's performance with Lucy Crowe, who's an amazing soprano. I've been trying to get her here for a long time. So even though this is our first inaugural and sort of beta experience with what we're calling breakfast at Wigmore, there's so much more to hear and to listen to in the coming days and weeks. So I hope those of you who are interested will tune in, and with any luck, you're going to tune in with us afterwards. So that's sort of my preamble. Elise, perhaps there are already questions, or there are comments you have from people.
Sure. Well, I don't have any questions on here yet. So anyone who is on the call or watching on Facebook, feel free to ask Sam your questions as soon as we get them in. I'm just sort of going through questions and letting Sam answer as they come in. But for me, this is what I want to know, Sam. I've personally never been to Wigmore Hall before, and I know that you've been to many amazing performances there. So I want to know what it's like. I want to know what it's like to really be sitting in a seat at Wigmore Hall, obviously when audiences are allowed to be there.
Wow, Wigmore is such an iconic place in London. It's on Wigmore Street, and it's close to where Steinway and Sons UK is situated. I've gone there so many times I can't tell you. It's a beautiful building. You walk in through a set of double doors with beautiful brass, handles, and you walk down this corridor. It's a somewhat narrow corridor. It's enough for 2 people, 3 people to go in either direction. On the walls on either side through this corridor, as you're leading yourself to the box office, are lots of posters and promotions of what Wigmore Hall is doing. And then you reach this tiny little box office to your left, and they're invariably very pleasant at the box office. And then you're right at the entrance of the hall itself. If you went downstairs, you would go to a beautiful little restaurant, cafe, bistro, where if you order in advance, you could have a dinner or a lunch before a performance. The restrooms are down there as well. And then you come up, and the hall is immediately before you. You either go to the right or to the left, and you go into house right or house left. But if you're going to go to the very small balcony that is at the back of the hall, then you have to go up a stairwell, sort of over your shoulder, and that's where you reach maybe 4 or 5 different rows of seats. I tend to like sitting downstairs more than upstairs, but sometimes upstairs is the only place you can get a seat. And I'll say this about the seating at Wigmore: it is cozy. It is not spacious. You are really quite. It's not designed for people who are 3 feet, 4 feet broad. You're just sort of in there, and once you sit down, you're going to be sitting down for a while. And there's no center aisle, but there's a center right aisle and a center left aisle. And there's about 3 or 4 seats on towards the wall. And if you're against the wall, you're really against the wall. You are literally against the wall. But if you're on the aisle, then you're a lucky person because you get a little bit more sort of personal space to breathe. And as you sit down, you notice that the stage is elevated. It's sort of like Spivey Hall, but at Wigmore, it's even more highly elevated. So the piano is up there, and they have this brass railing in front of it. And if you're going to a concert there, they have on a gigantic sign that has the no cell phone sign on it. It's dead center in the middle of the stage, and it sits there until someone backstage comes out on stage and removes it just before the concert starts. So at Wigmore, you are amongst people who are among the most rabid chamber music fans in the world. This is one of the most passionate and knowledgeable audiences you can imagine. There are people whose lives just exist because of Wigmore. And Wigmore presents 2 and sometimes 3 different performances a day. So if you're going into Wigmore, you're going into a very important shrine. It's almost a sacred place for chamber music. And back to coming in, if you go in, on the right is what Garrison Keillor would call the shameless commerce division of Wigmore Hall. They make their own recordings and they sell them right there. Also, throughout the UK and in England, in Europe generally, you don't get a free program. You have to buy a program. So one of the things you do in the center before you go right or left, is that you dig in your pocket and find all this change and try to come up with the right change for a program, which will give you information about the artist and certainly what the program is. And the notes are always very lucid, very well written, and they're beautifully printed. And I bring them home and read them again. So Wigmore has at an intermission, there's not a whole lot of time to go do anything. If you scramble downstairs fast, you can get to the restroom, but it's not an easy place to sort of get out. People sometimes go outside. But I think what I like most about Wigmore is the sense of focus. That audience is so incredibly focused on what's happening on stage. And that sense of connection is very similar to what happens at Spivey Hall. And that's why I feel very at home at Wigmore there, because I know that the people who have chosen to be there are really, really needing to experience what's about to happen.
Perfect. We have one question from an audience member that says, so be honest, which hall do you prefer for live music? Tell us about some of the differences between Spivey and Wigmore.
Ooh, I have to remember that the many people are listening and watching, so I have to be a little careful. We at Spivey Hall jokingly call Wigmore Hall, the Spivey Hall of England. And that's a little facetious on our part, because we're so fond of Spivey Hall and we're so fond of the acoustics of Spivey Hall. I can tell you this, artists adore performing at Wigmore Hall. It gives them a sense of experience that is very, very deeply valuable to them. As an audience member, I find Wigmore to be in some ways elevating, and it's sometimes sort of constraining. I feel that there's a more open spirit at Spivey Hall, simply because of this incredible space we have with the height that the organ pipes give us. Also, the color scheme is brighter at Spivey Hall, and the psychology of that experience is different than in a somewhat darker circumstance. However, Wigmore does have some real beautiful art behind the stage. I don't know the source of the artist, and I can't describe it very well, but I think you get a greater sense of tradition at Wigmore. I think that's the value added, whereas Spivey Hall doesn't have 100 years, anything like that, or even 119 years. We're coming up on 30 now. So I have found too that it's not as consistently immediate, the sound at Wigmore. I've sat a lot of places at Wigmore Hall, and right now I seem to be sitting in either Gene or Michael Riggle's seat. I never sit dead center first row, but this is where I am at this moment. I've never sat dead center first row at Wigmore, although I've sat close to that. It's Spivey, we have such an even experience, even though people, I have preferences here too. I prefer to sit somewhat back. But long story short, they're remarkably simple because they are designed for chamber music. They're designed for piano, particularly the Dixon Hall was designed for piano performance, to display this wonderful brand of German piano. So I wouldn't want to choose either or. I love both. I think we need both, and the world needs both. And it's a platform for where artists want to do chamber music and sing and be creative and just give us music from so many different centuries in such a variety of styles. Wigmore is a beautiful jewel, and it's a beautiful asset. But all I know is it takes me 7 minutes to get from my home to Spivey Hall. That's still its major advantage to me. Oh, I'm not hearing Elise.
I'm sorry about that.
There we go.
We have a few people who are asking about the acoustics of both and how that changes, not just for the audience, but for the performer as well, with the long structure.
Mm-hmm. I've asked artists about this, how does it work for you on Wigmore? Do you like it? And most artists are very diplomatic about what they're saying about halls because, diplomacy and tact are useful qualities when you're going around the world and trying to maintain a performance career. No one has any problems hearing themselves on stage. They seem to really enjoy being at Wigmore Hall. There are various pianos available at Wigmore. I think there's at least 2 that are used regularly. And our own Ulrich Gerhards, who is the godfather of Clara and Robert, our 2 Humbert Steinways. He looks after pianos. He and his team look after the pianos there. And there is one piano there that's somewhat older, but is it's favored still by many. And it's commonly known as the Old Lady. So I don't know if Stephen was playing the Old Lady or a different piano, but there is a choice of pianos there. Of course, there's many pianos just across the street in Ulrich's stable. So, the pianos are typically of an enormously high level and beautifully maintained. That makes the difference. Acoustics. I think we have more reverberation in our hall, a longer reverberation rate. Mm-hmm. I don't know the science I don't know how it's been quantified for Wigmore Hall, but I just feel that there's a slightly more voluptuous sound in Spivey than there is in Wigmore. And also because at Wigmore, there's something about Wigmore and the way it's laid out. It's not the main floor is level. So your neck is like this the entire time. No matter where you are, your neck is involved. You either have to have it slightly up or you have to have it quite a bit up. And you can't, unless you're in the balcony, you can't really look down on it like we can at the back of Spivey Hall. So it's not necessarily you don't feel as elevated, or you can't get quite the panoramic, sonic experience that you can by being a little further back at Spivey. But again, above at Wigmore, that has some nice features acoustically, even though if you're 6 feet tall and your knees don't fit, you're spending a lot of time managing yourself in your seat. And that is the one thing that I don't particularly like. Here we have more room, we have more comfortable seats, I think, and we certainly have more space.
Perfect. Well, of course, the question of the day, everyone I think wants to know what kind of ideas we have about if there's a possibility of doing such a live stream with any of our artists from Spivey, since we have a really great space for artists to be able to do that if we're not able to welcome audiences back this fall.
That is a question that Elise and others who are on part of the Spivey Hall staff know that we have been discussing at length. And the answer is we can get there in time, I think. The issue with streaming live in the moment has principally to do with internet bandwidth. And right now, Spivey Hall does not have sufficient internet bandwidth to stream a concert reliably. And I'm not even certain that the university as an institution has the bandwidth it really needs to do this. This has come up in discussions, and not just at Spivey Hall, but with other departments on the university campus. We are not a research institution like Georgia Tech or UGA, so we don't have massive amounts of scientific research being done that requires enormous amounts of internet bandwidth. I know that there is certainly a desire for us to have more bandwidth. Until we do get that bandwidth, it's going to be unlikely that we can stream in any predictably high quality way. I'm coming back to Alex Ross in the New Yorker. More recently, in one of his articles, he said, he noticed that there was this great rush to get performances online so that people could continue to have the experiences that they loved from music. And it was like, oh, look, we got it. But he also said, the ante has since been upped. We're past the stage of, oh, we finally just found some way to get online. Online experiences are in great abundance, and there are many that are extremely high quality. And Spivey patrons expect quality, particularly to hear well. And that is something that if we're going to do this, we want to do this in a Spivey-esque way. So long story short, I don't think streaming is going to be our first foot forward in this. Instead, right now, our emphasis is to try to enhance our incredible ability to record sound by also having, visuals. We are only occasionally a place where videography takes place. And right now, our focus is to make sure that we can shore ourselves up and be properly equipped to capture both audio and visuals and create something that may not necessarily at first be streamed live, but could still be captured and made available on the internet so that people can enjoy artistry made here and produced here locally. So I'm going to use an example of this. Season 30 was originally announced to present the Atlanta debut of a clarinet competition winner by the name of Kenny Broberg, a pianist who's still in his 20s. I mentioned Kenny before. He's supposed to play this wonderful program of fantasies, including the Schumann fantasy. So I'm not sure that we're going to have, internet bandwidth in order to stream come September. If Kenny is able to show up, then good things can happen. If he's allowed on campus because we are open and students can be on campus, then we can have audiences on campus. Then we have to figure out, can we really have audiences in Spivey Hall? We're still working on that. We're working towards it. We'd like to make it happen. But if all else fails, we could do pretty much what just happened with Stephen Hough. We could have Kenny on stage, and if he can get here, and if he can get here safely, and we can record a performance that he will give on either Robert and Clara or Clara, and we can edit it and then make it available on some platform that you get to choose that will, give you a sense of what had happened. And this was a program uniquely at Spivey Hall for Spivey Hall audiences. So I think that is probably the more likely manifestation of how we're going to have an online presence before we get to the notion of live streaming. The beauty of live streaming in London is that the Wigmore Hall already has BBC, and the BBC is mammothly well equipped to do anything with cameras. They know exactly what they're doing. We don't have the BBC at our command right now, but that's where partnership could also come into the picture at some time. So we're figuring this out, and it's an excellent question. I think that streaming is here to stay, and therefore we're going to have to lift our game to be part of the streaming world.
Thanks, Sam. And everyone at Spivey, as well as all of our patrons, we all want to see audiences back in the hall. We miss everybody. We truly do. We miss our friends. We miss our patrons. And we're looking forward to welcome you back to the hall. But in the meantime, we are, doing everything we can to come up with some really amazing opportunities while everyone's at home for you to be able to experience. And, just even if it's just a placeholder until we can come back together, that's what we're trying to create for you. So we miss you, and we do hope to see you soon. But in the meantime, let's get together and enjoy some of these online experiences. So
that's very much. Elise, I would like to thank you. I would like to thank Chris Tollick, and I would like to thank Tammy Moore for your assistance in making today's experiment our first attempt at doing this possible. It's definitely a collective effort, and I so appreciate having the support. And with any luck, we'll be able to announce future opportunities to enjoy breakfast at Wigmore among the Spivey friends. And we are, of course, tremendously interested in people's feedback on this. So I again repeat Elise's call for feedback that you may have. You can email us, you can call us. Most of you know how to reach me in various ways. So please do give us your thoughts, and we'll be grateful for it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Thank everybody today for joining us. I've had fun. Have you had fun?
It's been different, and yes, I could get used to this, and I'll become more of a morning person if we do this regularly.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again to everyone who was on the call today. We very much appreciate it, and we look forward to doing this again. Keep an eye out on Facebook and also via email. We'll send out some invites as we move forward and do a few more of these Breakfast at Wigmore experiences.
Terrific.
So thanks again, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Listen to music you love.